you've made the move to Tennessee. We're in New York for, is it 42 years?
44 years.
44 years. So you made the move to Tennessee. Why? And are you enjoying it?
There was many reasons, obviously, being in New York, since I came back, basically left Czechoslovakia, went, through Italy and ended up in New York. I will always consider it my hometown, and love New York. But, life changes and one gets a little bit older and, the need to live in a big city kind of, disappears a little bit. So, we were looking already for some time, me and my wife, for something a little bit more peaceful, quieter. We always kind of expected to end up in Florida because that's the center of tennis.
Yeah.
And then, lo and behold, you came to New York to do the consultation, and one thing led to another, and the conversation about us possibly leaving New York. And, everything came together basically with Farm and Forge being built, and the whole idea and the philosophy behind it was, something that we always, me and my wife and other people talk about, that if we could, we would. And here we are. That's how it came about.
So give us your first impressions of Tennessee. I'm sure New Yorkers have a certain perspective of Tennessee. I actually saw some research the other day that most people don't say Tennessee, they say Nashville, because Nashville has such a positive connotation where correct. Tennessee has a different one. But tell us, what do you think about the South? What do you think about Nashville? What do you think about College Grove, Tennessee, and kind of the people and all that?
I've been here before because we played Davis Cup here actually, many, many years ago I was, stringing for the U.S. Davis Cup team, and already back then, not really knowing what to expect since I've never been here, we all loved it. The whole team, we loved it. So we had a very, very positive kind of view of Nashville. And, then it's obviously the music, the healthcare industry is here, which everybody knows about it, and as you know, a lot of people are moving to, Tennessee. So if you watch the news, you kind of see, so the expectation was really not so much as a deep South kind of in the traditional way, as opposed to very modern growing city. And that's exactly what we found here. So to be honest with you, me and my wife, we actually don't live in Nashville. We decided to live a little bit closer to College Grove, like in between in Franklin, which is, it's a city kind of town a little bit. So it's very lively, a lot of energy, a lot of cars, a lot of traffic. So we like all of it, but it's kind of in between, it's no longer New York City. So we loved it from the first day, to be honest.
Awesome. What about the people? A city's not just the city, it's also the people and the people around here. How have you enjoyed and gotten to know the people?
It's, it's kind of interesting because you mentioned to me before we even moved here, he said, you have to think of Nashville as, it's a southern city in a sense that it's still people from the South is being very nice and pleasant and, and polite. However, it's people from all over. So it's kind of already very cosmopolitan, place.
Right.
And so that's exactly what it is, So coming from New York where, people are not known to be the most polite, to say the least. So we really enjoy it. It always comes down to people, to be honest, because like you say, city is a city, that's buildings and streets, and that's nice, but people make it, you either like it or don't like it. So, to be honest with you, it's almost, coming from New York, when you leave New York, you almost think, being nice, it's kind of something, watch out for it, right? Because somebody wants something from you. And, being here, everybody's nice because it's easy to be nice. And I mean, everywhere you go to stores, supermarkets, I got my car serviced yesterday. I picked up my license plate, and everywhere you go, everybody is just normal, nice, and pleasant. So it's a big, big plus.
That's great. That's great to hear. So tell us about the facility here at Farm and Forge as it stands today, and how that impacted your decision to move.
You were kind of obviously the driving force behind it. So, you showing us and explaining what Farm and Forge is all about. To be honest, that's why we are here, right? Because I've seen a lot of places traveling around the world, a lot of, great tennis places and, from all over the world, all continents, and so Farm and Forge to me, and I still think that I'll be right, and I know it's maybe a little bit too early, I think it's a very unique approach and very, very unique place because it's not just, oh, we built nice 36 tennis courts, come and see us. There's a lot of nice tennis courts kind of all over. It's the combination of the philosophy, it's the tennis mixed with other sports. It's the human performance, but obviously being built kind of into it. The education part, because coming from New York and Northeast, it's all about education, right? So it's all about good schools. So a lot of kids in that part of the world, they play tennis to get to good college
Sure.
and or other sports, so that the aspect of the education being incorporated into the farm and forge philosophy, to me, that changes everything. So all these things combined together, I think, make this, farm and forge,
Very
unique. As unique as it gets.
That makes sense. So then when you think about, tell us about the facility where it sits today, what's here, and then can you also kind of paint a picture for the viewer of where the facility's headed?
We moved here actually beginning of December. So as you know, we moved into this old barn where we started stringing because
what was y'all's first day here at Farm and Forge?
It was actually this October 2nd. October 1st, we just drove over. October 2nd, we arrived and we went to work, right away, basically, to set up, to unload. And we were set up. In a way, it was really good, to be honest, to be here before the facility gets built, because you kind of become part of it.
Right.
You get to understand the foundation, and the people are all kind of jammed together into this smaller building. So that means you get to know everyone, So it was a really good thing, to be honest, to come, that early. About 4 weeks after the first building with the 6 indoor courts and where the pro shop is and where we sit right now, it was open. So we were able to move into our space, which is, out of this world is an understatement.
Yeah. To paint a picture for people, when you guys showed up October 2nd, the building we're sitting in right now wasn't even open. And we renovated an old barn, and you and Angelica, y'all moved into that old barn, kind of like you said, in a little corner, and everybody, all of Farm and Forge was packed into that one location. And I agree with you that it was great for everybody to sort of get to know each other. Now you're in this huge 65,000 square foot building that's actually, with the mezzanine space, 80,000 square feet. And like you said, your shop is gigantic compared to the shop that you had in New York. Can you just paint a picture for the viewer what your shop looks like, what's in there, and kind of tell them about the space?
It's obviously, being in New York, it's always what's the most expensive thing, it's real estate, right? So that kind of creates limitations, because it's a financial limitations, because obviously you can get as many square feet as you want, but you have to pay for it, right? So, a tennis shop or something, what we do, there are limitations to how much money basically you can go and spend on real estate. Right. So that basically means that every shop in New York is small, right? So our shop, the original one before, we were for about 27 years on the second floor. We had about 1,100 square feet. The building was sold. We had to move. We were able to move right across the street on the same block, same street, which was, very beneficial to us, but it was even smaller. It was 750 square feet. So we made it work. However, there were, big limitations what type of equipment you can bring in, because something is too heavy and something is too big or too noisy. And so the space wouldn't allow for it. And, coming here to Farm and Forge, obviously we have, I would say, about 3,000 square foot space, which, we were able to actually help the design. We kind of, work with the designer of the place. We told them what we want and where we want it. And if we want a so-called, what I call the dirty room, to be behind glass so people can see in, but nobody can get hurt. The noise gets reduced. The dirt doesn't go outside. So we basically, all the wishes came through, and the space then allows us to do all these projects that we were never able to do because of, again, we had no space for it.
You didn't have the space to do it.
We didn't have the space, yeah.
So when you walk in the front door of your shop, give the folks a tour of your shop. To the left, straight ahead, to the right, what would they see?
I mean, when you walk in, obviously, first thing that hits you, probably every single customer who came in, they go, wow, oh my God, I've never seen anything like it, because how big the space is, right?
Yeah.
And it's not only big, again, I mean, thanks to the architects and the designers, they really let us kind of give it that, what we call the New York flavor to the space a little bit.
Right.
Because, for example, there is no ceiling. The ceilings are actually
all the way up
beams
to the roof. Yeah.
all the way up to the roof. So the height is, I don't even know what it is, 30 feet, and it has that industrial look, which is always what our shop is, because we are not really a tennis shop per se, but we have, CNC machine and sanding blocks, and, it's an industrial space a little bit. So the design, it helps it. However, when you walk into the left, you have this enormous string bar, which is marble tops, and imagine sitting in a huge bar with marble tops and beautiful chairs, so people can come, have a seat,
it really
talk
is
to
beautiful.
us,
Yeah.
watch us string, have a conversation with us, or sit there and do your homework.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a big part. Sit there and do your homework.
Correct,
The way that this isn't just a how do you say it? This isn't just a club. That's the mission of it is to make as much money as possible. This is really a family environment.
Correct.
Right.
Correct,
And you may literally have a young person doing their homework right next to somebody who flew in from New York for a consultation.
Yeah.
And I think it's a special thing that both of those are right there in the same location.
To be honest with you, that's almost one of those things that, it's a benefit that I didn't even know that it would be a benefit there,
Right.
or something. Because, in New York, again, because of the space limitation, because everyone is in a rush all the time. So there is a certain culture gets, kind of evolves from it. Not bad, not good. It just, that's what it is, and come in here, and the space and how much it's welcoming for you to have a seat and, sit down and work in our space, do your homework there. And that's exactly what's happening. So the kids are coming and sitting and talking, and some of them already kind of shown interest in stringing. So we, started teaching a couple of them how to string, because, why not? And we involved the kids who are part of the academy into, help me design this whole place. Let me put the rackets on the wall. We got, 10 boxes coming. They come in and help us unpack. And it's become this very family-like feeling, which is, it's hard to describe, but it's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. So when it is totally a family feel. Tell me a little bit, you mentioned early the people.
Mm-hmm.
And in sort of a corporate environment, it's really hard to have a family feel, right? But it's been sort of curated here, and I think part of that is mainly what you mentioned, the people. So tell us about the people you get to work with.
Look, I personally never work for a larger corporation, right? I always work for myself. So for me, it's almost, more natural in a way, because I was always my boss, and basically this continues here, and that very, very familiar and immediate kind of connection to people. My wife, in the past, she worked for the corporate world, then she worked in a small business. So this is kind of that, combination of both. Corporate, I mean, obviously there is a lot of means behind building this facility, right? So that's what allows us to be where we are. So that's the good part. And obviously there's going to be a lot of, different sports and the education. So there has to be a corporate structure in a way behind it, as I understand corporate structure. However, the feeling of, the family feeling, I don't know if you can replicate it anywhere else. Again, it's hard for me to say, since I didn't work on corporations, but I can imagine that it's not normal, because it's really, from the owner of this beautiful facility to people who we work here, and it could be the teachers, the pros, it can be, the janitorial staff. Everybody is kind of like, part of one family. It's not divided, but, who are you, and don't talk to me and stuff. So it's amazing.